Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education Committee of the Whole for April 12th, 2022. And could you please call the roll?
Andy Duran.
Present.
Ann Hill, present. Mark Berry.
Present.
Carrie Steinbach.
Present.
Tim Penich.
Present.
Amy Connell Donahue.
Present.
Lauren Hirsch.
Present.
All right, we have everybody's present and we have quorum. And we can begin. My screen just went weird on me for some reason. Sorry. Bear with me. Yep. I got it. Okay, if you guys could please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, our first item is for public comment. We'll start with the audience. If anybody in the audience would like to make public comment, please step to the podium and state your name.
Hi. Okay, so hi, my name's Lane Bennett and I have 3 children here in the District 65. And tonight I'm here to present a newer nonprofit charity called Paws for Patrick. And Paws for Patrick was established in 2022 by the Romer family of Lake Forest to honor their late son, Patrick, who lived with depression and anxiety for several years and died from his illness in May of 2020. Patrick always had a special connection to his beloved dog, Cece, and truly found comfort and light with her by his side, even and especially during his darkest days. Thus, in his memory, Paws for Patrick is dedicated to connecting young people to emotional support animals, and they're called ESAs, to aid them as they live with mental health illness. And Paws for Patrick does this in 2 ways. First, they guide their clients through the process of obtaining an ESA certification letter by connecting them to licensed clinical therapists. And then Paws for Patrick assists them in locating, adopting, and paying for an ESA. And they also facilitate and fund the proper training. And then the second way that Paws for Patrick helps with mental illness is also they have a team of trained therapy dogs and handlers who are available for group and individual interactions in settings such as schools, youth organizations, and therapy sessions. And as you all know, more than ever, now is when there's an urgent and critical need for intervention and mental health awareness. So May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and in honor of this, Paws for Patrick will be turning 22 towns, mostly a lot on the North Shore, green for mental health awareness. And I'm here tonight presenting to you the board and asking if Lake Bluff Elementary School and the middle school would be interested in participating with supporting Paws for Patrick. And I have here's an example of a sign that if possible, we could maybe put a few up, visible, walking to school, by the bike racks. And then also this is the green ribbon that they use they tie around trees. And I'm sure you have seen it locally around and it's just spreading. And as they're saying, everyone's turning these towns green. So and I got permission from the Village of Lake Bluff to do this. And I also got permission from the Lake Bluff Library. So on Saturday, April 30th, I'm going to be at the gazebo with a group of people passing out the ribbons and cutting and tying them around the trees down here in the village. And also I'm giving ribbon for people to take home and do it at their private residences. And so that will be starting in April, and this goes through May. And I was, again, here asking if it would be possible if our 2 schools in some way could get together during, now the weather's getting nicer, if they could go outside for trying to figure out how we could incorporate this into a day activity curriculum. A group could go out and do this to the middle school and the elementary school. And what else did I want to say? And that's it. And I know the Romer family personally, so, and it's been 2 years now since Patrick passed, but this is just a local, great nonprofit charity. And I think, Andy, have you worked with them before in some, do you know anything else you'd like to add, or just, same thing?
Yeah,
Okay,
thank you, Lynn.
that's what I thought. So, yeah, and that's what I'm here to present tonight. So, thank you.
Thanks,
And
Lynn.
I guess I look forward to hearing from you guys as soon as possible. Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you, Lynn.
Is there an ask? Are you asking?
I guess, yes, I am asking for the permission from the board to put a few signs and ribbons around the trees on the school property.
Okay.
Yes,
And
thank you.
do we have, so the question I guess is that we just need to hear, is there a facility use policy or some other policy that would limit that?
So this is a new one for us to be asked, and the closest that we could come up with would be the policy that refers to utilizing school grounds for events that are not sponsored by the school district. This one isn't sponsored by the school district. And I know that before I got here, that policy was put in place for a reason.
Yeah.
And so Lane did reach out and ask, and I just wanted to make sure that we had a discussion about this, because obviously you had extensive discussions as a board prior to my arrival about using our facilities for non-school sponsored events.
Yeah.
So I
Those
think,
are specific, like the incident in question was a wedding at the middle school. I mean, that was
And
a
the
mistake,
issue was
clearly a mistake.
noise.
That was clearly a mistake, but this is very different. Do we need to have a policy committee talk about this, or do you think we can?
no, because it's at the board's discretion anyway. So my thought is we can add this to April 25th, the 26th meeting to, if you want to.
Would we
vote
approve on it?
and approve
Okay.
it, and then I'll let Lane
Okay,
know.
thank you.
Does that sound?
Yes,
okay?
April 26th.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank
Lane.
you.
Thanks, Lane.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Do we have any public comment online or Zoom or written comment?
Nothing? No, no
Well,
comments.
Since we don't have president's reports and superintendent's reports built into the agenda today, I'm going to take this opportunity in public comment to just do a shout out to everybody who participated in the school play, the middle school play this year, Matilda. I heard it was amazing. I did not have the opportunity to attend, but I heard the amount of work that went into this thing was over the top. I heard rave reviews about some of the incredible acting performances and the scenery and the set design and all the kids who get involved in all that level of stuff. And I just wanted to tip of the hat, shout out to everybody involved. And thank you for, I know Miss C gets heavily involved in that every year and puts in a lot of hours, and there's all the other staff members who are involved. And it's one of those things that make Lake Bluff special. We have this enormous middle school tradition that goes back, I don't know, it must go back before you were here, right? I mean, yeah, but it goes way back, and it's a wonderful tradition. And I think it's just something special that we do in this community. And so just wanted to draw attention to it, recognize it, and say thank you to all who are involved and all the kids who are involved, and great job. I had a thought, I wonder if anybody else felt the same way, but I thought it'd be really cool to have a place on our website to have a video of these shows online. It would be, I think it would be really neat to have check out the play you didn't get to see, or from years of, history of years. I'm sure there's videos out there of some of these things.
And I'm going to ask Nate to address that, because I did ask him the question, and there's a reason. There's a little story behind this.
So the answer is that depends, because when we buy the rights to a musical, there are some very specific requirements in terms of allowing for or not allowing for photography and video. When it's an option, we typically opt for it. Disney is notoriously strict about that. This was a
Okay.
Disney production, and so we were not able to film or videotape this one.
That's kind of a shame.
What
We do
about
have last
photos?
year's. What's that?
We put up photos.
Collage.
We,
I know it's not the same, but-
that's a fair question. I think we could do still imagery, I believe, because we took those during rehearsals and that sort of thing. I posted a bunch of them on Instagram, and I know parents were taking pictures, but I think we could probably get a good number of pictures that we could put up.
Together and you got
It was really amazing.
I have heard that before. I remember you one time said that before too. Thank you. Any other comments on any of that, or anything else anybody else wants to share?
No, I thought it was amazing. I mean, I'm blown away by how talented our students are. And actually what I thought was really cool too is there are some longtime staff members that were really involved in it. Ms. C referenced and some others, ZJ doing the art, but I think also at least heavily involvement from two brand new teachers to the district, Ms. Aarons and Mr. Ingram, which I thought was really cool, just how that culture quickly, to more people. So that was great.
All right. Addition of a discussion item. And so I'm going to take the opportunity here also to, my screen's not switching over as fast as I would like right now.
Board book has been slow today.
And I wrote notes on, this is my first meeting when I wrote exclusively notes on the computer, not on paper.
Unfortunate.
But I think I can do this by memory. So every meeting, we give the opportunity for board members to offer up a future agenda item that we will put on an agenda, or to raise an issue that needs a brief discussion today that wasn't on the agenda, because we can do a brief discussion. And so I want to throw that out there if anybody has an agenda item they would like to see on the list of future agenda items. I will add one simple one. Next Wednesday or Thursday, there is a meeting of the legislative committee with Lake Forest. And I think it would be wise at our meeting at the end of the month to have a legislative committee update, because they're going to introduce some new topics at that meeting. Anybody else have an agenda item or discussion item?
I do want to let the board know that I will add a presentation on the Portrait of a Graduate process, most likely at our last meeting in April or the first meeting in May, because we have 2 meetings left. We're halfway through the process. It's going really well, as well as strategic planning for our district, and potentially in collaboration with the village, the Park District, and the Lake Bluff Library. We are all up for strategic plans in the next year to year and a half. And we've had a couple discussions about how powerful it would be to sort of emulate the process of Portrait of a Graduate and think about a portrait of a community under kind of a big umbrella about, kind of what do we want moving forward into the next few years, and how can all of the organizations kind of feed into that and have strategic plans that are aligned with those priorities.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Also kind of logistically, just because it would be really hard to have enough volunteers for each of these strategic plans from the town. And we, think it might be a great process to just bring everyone in the same room and have a facilitated process that could lead to something really aligned and powerful. So that'll be coming soon.
The system's not, I don't know if I'm connected to the web, to the internet, to the network, but it's, I tried, it won't refresh. I can't even, anyways, wow, so I got all kinds of error messages popping up now. Under addition of an agenda item, I also wanted to bring up a discussion, brief discussion. You guys may or may not be aware, or may not have been approached about issues surrounding the golf course, and how there's a discussion in the community to perhaps turn the golf course into a prairie and a water retention holding facility. I'm not familiar with the intimate working details, but it's generated a fair amount of controversy. I had things posted on my door last weekend when I was out. There's been a lot of not so polite conversations on various places on the internet regarding it. There's been some misinformation spread. And both Andy and I'd be curious if anybody else has had people who have positions or affiliated with the pro and con side of that whole thing approach the district and ask us if we wanted to take a position publicly. And so I just wanted to share that with you guys if you'd heard anything, and also ask if you have any perspective on that. Does the school have a role to play?
I have an opinion. I don't think that I sit on a committee, I should say, for the Park District. So I'm familiar with what's happening. In my opinion, I don't think that the school really should involve themselves in that community decision, because the school isn't using that facility beyond middle school golf, I think is the only time that it's used. I may be wrong about that. If we were using it on a regular basis, I think that might make a difference, but otherwise, I think they're very separate.
Okay. Anybody else have thoughts on that? Carrie's smiling.
I don't disagree, but I
I
don't
You might want to
agree.
pull your mic down.
Just, I don't know very much except what I've read on Facebook. So of course, everything's true. And I would think because of our property lines of the school and the golf course, it would potentially affect the elementary school at least. I don't think the board should take a stand. However, you know, it is still something in the community that maybe it is something to go forward in another meeting and have some sort of presentation, just so we're made aware of what's going on. Well, no, that would go opposite of what I was saying, but just so that we're informed.
I wouldn't be surprised if we had people come to public comment and talk about it at some point, but it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I really don't know
Yeah.
anything about it, other than I've heard that they want to turn, I don't even know who they are, want to turn the golf course into a.
Yeah, there's people who are strongly in favor of the prairie conversion, and there's people who are strongly in favor of retention, keeping it as a golf course. And there's a lot of passion on both sides, and it's building. And that's, I don't know much more about it either than that. Tim, did you have a comment?
I was just gonna say, I agree with what Carrie said about just the proximity of the elementary school to the golf course. And if there is a change, I would hope that the school would at least be, you know, I know in one of the idealized plans, they're talking about like a soccer field and stuff in addition to a prairie. And I don't know if things were to go that far, maybe there'd be some sort of partnership that would be but I don't know. That would be the only thing that I would say that we should be involved with.
Well, you do bring up an interesting point that we already have partnerships with the park district, right? I mean, ARC goes over there and.
But it's
I don't know what
separate
else.
from the park district. Right, isn't the
I
golf
don't know,
course
that's
is
my
a different
question, I
thing?
don't know.
Is
It is
it
the
It's
park
Park District land,
It's
It's
park
the park
district
district land, but.
and they
run
would
by
still
the-
retain.
It's run by Golf Visions
Okay.
currently.
Which was the last, right, the last time they wanted to turn the golf course into something else, then.
Yeah, Golf Visions stepped in and is running it.
And I do meet regularly with like Bluff leaders from the Park District and Village and Library. We just met today. And so John Beeler gives us updates every time. So I can certainly request that somebody come to the board at some point when decisions are, you know, getting close to being finalized so that we're aware of what the plans are, if that's what the board would like.
That's probably a good idea. Andy, you wanna?
No, I was just gonna add that, yeah, I was approached a number of times this weekend and had things left on my door. And I've heard a little bit about the issue, but I think the biggest concern I have is just some of the inaccuracy of the data, I think, that's going around, and then the not sourcing anything. It's just different sides making up stuff. Sorry. So I think it would be good to have an impartial party make a presentation formally, so we could get the full scope of what's actually happening.
I know the former members of the land use committee for the Park District have reconvened and are supposed to be scoping out the facts, is my understanding. Might be good to get links to their presentations and share them with the board.
They have stuff on the
Is
park
it already
district.
out there?
They have videos and their board pack, their park districts, and has now put their board packets online.
Yeah.
Well, it'd probably help to also know what the district currently, or how much usage or what we use it for. I know you said middle school golf, but other than that, what do we currently use as a district?
I think I would, that's a good point. I would want to lean on the administration to know if this is something we need to be overly concerned about, or if it's something that we just need to be aware of. I think there's two different things, but whatever you think in terms of
I think
How it
what
affects
what
us.
I'm hearing is, I'm hearing some good information, good takeaways about getting the facts,
Mhm.
right? It'd be good to know the facts. It would be good to know about usage. I caution, my personal concern is getting involved in the politics of all that. I think we have enough on our plate, making sure we do the right thing for the kids in our district and keeping an eye on taxpayer money to take sides in this issue. So I would be very careful going down that road, my personal opinion.
I agree, Mark.
Yeah.
I agree.
I
I
agree
think
too.
there's a difference between us taking a stand or taking a side and just understanding what's happening in the space next to one of
Yeah,
our schools.
yeah, yes.
right?
And how it would or wouldn't impact us.
Agreed. Okay. Any other question, any other issues for this discussion or adding an agenda item kind of topic here? Not hearing any. I'm going to move on to, I do have my internet connection back. Discussions and presentations. Our first presentation is Mr. Khan, if he's available. He's going to talk to us about budget parameters. It's the first major revenue, presentation will summarize the major revenue and expense factors that the administration expects for the next fiscal year, so for 22-23. And Jay will give us his perspective on how we are preparing for that budget. And we approved the budget, I believe, by the end of September, right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, Mark, I'm going to talk about the assumptions that are going to go into the budget. You'll see a draft budget before the end of June. That's the budget that we use to start operating in July. Then we pass a tentative budget formally in August. It goes on file in the district office and on our website for a 30-day public viewing period. And we pass the final budget in September.
Right, thank you.
And I just need to share my screen and I can start the presentation. There you go. Everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the 22-23 budget assumptions for next year's budget. This will be a challenging budget year. The district is seeing a lot, well, everyone is seeing a lot of inflation in pretty much all areas. And our revenue is tied to inflation, but there's a lag. So we'll have the ability or the opportunity to increase our revenue to adjust for the CPI, but not until the following fiscal year. So we're operating off of last year's CPI, which was 1.4%. So I'm just going to go through the assumptions, and if people have comments or questions, please feel free to jump in. So as I said, the 2021 tax levy, which will be collected in 2022 and June and September, and be the major revenue stream for the 22-23 fiscal year, actually is going up by 2.2%. I had said that there is a 1.4% CPI. That's going to be the increase on existing property, and then with the new property, or the taxes on new property, the total increases will be about 1.7%. Next year is there's an unusual or a new item that I really didn't know how to not to account for, but to project or predict. Over this last year, it was a little bit quiet, but the governor signed a Public Act 102-519 into law, which allows the treasurer to recapture, they call it a recapture levy. And basically what that is between November of last year and November this year, any reduction in our property tax collection or any taxes we were not able to collect as a result of certificates of error, property tax appeal board decisions, or court decisions about the assessed value of a property, the tally that total amount up and they add it back to our levy, to the following year's levy and spread that out across the entire tax base. So pretty much what that means is if you have individual properties that are appealing their taxes from prior years, when they are successful, the district has to refund them their money and basically write a check out of the current year receipts to reimburse them for taxes that they overpaid because they were successful in reducing their assessment. And this recapture levy allows the district to recover that money. And it's actually quite a substantial sum this year. It's $93,000, which represents about 0.5% of the total levy. And that's, really more or less what we don't collect on a given year or an annual basis, because the money that we don't collect in Lake County or in our area is not really just due to non-payment. It's mostly due to reassessments and refunds and things like that. So this is a new thing for this year. The total increase for the taxes is going to be about $400,000. Without this, I think it would have been pretty difficult to balance the budget, but it's nice to have it. And then debt service is going up 1.2%. This is just based on our debt service schedule that was approved by voters when the debt was approved by referendum or was issued by for the small amount we have issued for non-referendum debt for the middle school. And then again, I'm assuming a collection rate of 99.5%, which is a historical level. State revenue, most of our state revenue is from evidence-based funding, which is unrestricted. We can spend on whatever we want. Evidence-based funding is the kind of the new school funding formula. It's based on the school district's criteria and their level of need. Because we are in what they call tier 4, which means that we are over 120% of adequacy, what the state calculates to be adequate funding based on research formula of all its criteria. We get the state funding minimum, the base funding minimum, which is the amount that we were collecting when this new law went into effect, and it's grown every year a little bit when there's money left over in the appropriation. And then transportation aid is going up by a lot, but really only because we're spending a lot more this year in special education transportation, and this revenue stream is a refund of the prior year's expenses at 80%. Corporate property.
Jay,
Sure. Yep.
I just want to add a little color commentary to people who may not know. The evidence-based funding line, that was a change in the law a number of years ago that was the purpose of which was to create more equity, to provide funding to districts that really don't have the property wealth that we do and really struggle to pay their bills and meet the needs of the kids in those districts. So that's why we get very little of EBF. So just that's it. Thanks.
No problem. It was in 2017, and like as you said, Mark, was the first overhaul of the state funding formula. It was a big effort by all of the different groups, the associations of school boards and administrators and school business officials, and it was research based and was really the state funding formula prior was very unfair, and it was when they didn't have enough money to make the payments. They just cut everybody equally, which, by like 20%, everyone gets 20% less, which also wasn't fair because some districts get 80% of their funding from the state. And as we do, we only get less than 5% of our funding from the state. So that was an effort to make state funding more fair and based on actual research and what it takes to educate kids and not just an arbitrary number, which is how it was in the past. Corporate property taxes or corporate taxes are at record levels historically. Typically, we get $120,000 to $150,000 a year from this. I'm projecting $230,000 for next year, which is sort of flat with what I'm expecting to receive this year, or it's flat versus what we've already received this year. And it's very hard to predict because it's based on corporate profits, and I think there's some other formulas that go into it, and different companies pay at different times of the year. So This is based on the state projection. So this year's state forecast for property taxes for us was 230,000. So that's also a revenue stream that's larger than normal and welcome. And then lastly, grant money. We should be receiving quite a bit of grant money next year. I was hoping to receive all $250,000 of that ARP ESSER money, which is the third round of COVID relief funding next year. But we've already spent a lot of that money and we were required to start to apply for it. And so our application has been approved and now we need to start getting reimbursed for it. So we'll see some of that money, about $50,000, I think this year. I've not filled out the first expenditure report, and we'll see the remaining 200,000 next year. Our playground maintenance grant was approved for 50,000, so we should be receiving that next year. Then the ARP or American Rescue Plan IDEA, Individuals with Disability Education Act. We get a lot of other IDEA money. This was some supplemental special education funding that was allocated through this COVID relief package. And then we should see some carryover from this year's grants that will be spent next year to help with teacher training and professional development. And so those are the revenue assumptions for next year. So that's the good news. The expenditure assumptions, again, I said, as we're seeing lots of inflation. You already know we're approving lots of salary adjustments for next year. We've already approved adjustments for the aides and the secretaries. We'll also be adjusting maintenance and custodial and some of the district office staff and some administration. So we're probably going to have about 5.1%, roughly 5% of salary increase for next year over this year. Due to those salary adjustments, we've also got some staffing increases. Some of the increases are not necessarily an increase over the prior year, but they are positions that we were projecting to go away. They're either grant funded, or they're temporary staff that we have continued to retain because we see the need. The board approved the addition of a full section of pre-K, which is one teacher and one aide for next year. We've not, however, seen the demand for pre-K enrollment. And so we're backing that off at this point to a half a section, which would be a half FTE of a teacher and an aide. As you know, we added a new tech administrator. Her contract was approved at the last meeting. And then we're moving our assistant principals from 10 months to 12 months. We have one retirement next year, and we do have some moderate staff turnover. We've not filled any of those positions yet, so they're forecasted kind of in the middle of the schedule because we don't know who we're going to be able to find. Staffing has been very difficult. We also have some aide positions outstanding that we still need to fill. The health insurance renewal, these numbers represent the final renewal, and they're actually a little bit better than the preliminary renewal, which is what some of you may have seen previously. So these numbers are outstanding, especially in this type of inflationary environment. A lot of it is due to our very good experience. We had very healthy staff last year and did not spend a lot in health premiums. And then our cooperative is doing a really good job at finding, at bidding and getting good contracts with our pharmaceutical vendors, which is one of the primary sources of inflation. And then also just negotiating with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And then the co-op as a whole has seen not as good experience as we have, but fairly decent experience. And then
those numbers are amazing. They're not just great. They're
right there. And that's also really welcome next year, because health insurance is a considerable part of our budget and one which we don't have a lot of control over. Our contracts are going to be going up significantly. This is, any of our third-party contracts. RJB is our night custodial. Later this evening, we'll be bringing an extension for 1 year. That extension is capped at 3% increase. It goes up and down with CPI, but is capped at 3%. Olson Transportation, This is probably the biggest increase that we will see. Their route costs are up 13.5%. I think I may have mentioned it at a previous meeting that I expected it to be big and in double digits, and they did not disappoint me. So they sent me an article with that Walmart was offering $100,000 salaries for truck drivers. And he was saying he's losing bus drivers to those types of jobs. And just, it's really hard to fill positions. And this is, again, this is without fuel. So fuel is also going up 40%. We pay for that separately. I'm hoping that will be a short-lived increase and not last the entire year, but we're expecting an increase there as well. And then I'm going to assume that we're going to go back to 10 routes. Right now, we only have 9 and we have very full buses. We may be stuck with 9 routes again next year if we can't staff the drivers. So that's still, right now I'm in my budget, I'm planning on 10, but that is still up in the air. And then software, we also do, we license a lot of software. Many of our instructional programs are not in textbooks anymore. A lot of this stuff is online. And we're seeing kind of an average of about 5% increase in software licenses. And then I also do not have our property casualty insurance premiums back yet, but I'm budgeting about 10% for those because cybersecurity insurance particularly is very costly and getting more and more expensive and driving up a lot of the overall rates. Technology, as you know, we are restructuring our department. We are currently planning on maintaining a 3-person department and eliminating one of the techs. We actually had one of the techs at elementary school resigned in March, and we've not been able to fill that position. I don't anticipate that we will fill it for the rest of the year, and we, just given our current needs, seem to be able to be okay. We would like to hire a replacement for Paul, and between the new administrator and the two kind of higher and more experienced and also better paid technicians handle a lot of the other tasks that we need in addition to addressing staff and student needs during the day. So the budget also sort of right now anticipating only 3 people in the tech department, which would be down 1 versus what we were expecting, but at the same level as it was for most of our recent history, including during the pandemic. We are also going to be saving money on internet next year. The state Department of Innovation and Technology has a program where they offer free internet service to all schools and libraries, and they basically are using a federal program, and they pool everybody's federal dollars, and they're able to go out and get bids and offer all of the internet to school districts at no cost. So it's a really nice program. I've heard very good things about it. This has been around for about a year, but we were in a 3-year contract that is ending in June of this year, so we were not able to take advantage of it previously. For the first year, we're actually going to be augmenting their service with some additional service we're buying privately. This will be redundant service. So if I think we're getting the state service through Comcast, and we're purchasing some bandwidth through AT&T, and that way we will have, we'll basically be insured that we will always be connected in case of any issues with one provider or the other. And then just to do this at least for a year to make sure that we have enough bandwidth from the state and that it's a reliable program and a reliable network, since this is the first time we'll be using it. And then we'll be replacing basically our current contract for what they call virtual CIO services, since we did not previously have a director of technology. Diopath served that purpose for us. We're no longer going to be using those services, but we will need some higher level networking support that we'll not be able to have in-house, and then the cybersecurity support as well. And then expecting to see increased special education costs. We do have a lot of kids with significant needs moving into the district. We had a lot move out this year, so we're not necessarily seeing a big increase in the number of students. But I think we're going to have a True North update later on in this meeting. And they are also seeing very large inflation, wage inflation. They also adjusted their aids even more than we did. And they're also seeing some, their contracts, they've got some contractual large staffing pay increases. And I think they're also expecting some capital projects that need to be done next year. So I'm expecting a pretty large increase in the special education area. And so this is where typically in my budget, I budget at least one extra student to protect against move-ins. And in order to balance the budget, I'm not going to have that level of contingency. I'm not going to be able to have that level of contingency. So we are pretty much forecasting what we know and don't have, if some kids do move in that have needs, we'll need to adjust some other line items in the budget. And then we are going to be seeing some savings in contracted services. Our legal costs have gone down quite a bit since we
He's dying.
finished all of our lawsuits and things like that.
Feel free to take some water if you need it, Jay. We appreciate you
That's what I'm doing.
powering through this.
And so, yeah, we've settled a lot of our lawsuits and we're not negotiating next year at all. So I'm expecting lower legal costs. We are not probably going to need our staff evaluation consultant. And then in software, although we're seeing increases, we have some multi-year contracts that we paid for already. So there's some software we're not going to need to pay re-up again next year. We've got some very focused professional development and then very limited capital spending. I'm actually pleased that I could fit $200,000 into this year's budget. I wasn't expecting to be able to. Depending on how this year goes, we may be able to do the playground project, at least some of it this fiscal year. We still have a truck that we were unable to purchase due to supply issues that we need for next year. And then we have about $200,000 in the capital projects fund balance. Should anything arise where we would need to spend the money and that we would not be impacting next year's budget. And those were all the assumptions that I had for next year.
Any discussion, questions or comments for Mr. Khan?
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jace. Appreciate you powering through that despite not feeling so great. I hope you feel
problem.
better.
Thank you.
So the big takeaway is our tax levy increased by 2.2%, but our expenses are quite a bit more than that, unfortunately. And we appreciate the thoroughness with which you look at this and whatever we can do to help make this year work smoothly, we will try to do our best.
Great.
All right. If there's nothing else from Mr. Khan, we're going to move on.
The next one
Is also Jay, which is the, as he mentioned, it's the contract renewal for our custodial services.
Yep, so the RJB contract we went out for bid and selected RJB in April of 2019. The first year
Almost.
of the contract was 1920. In the contract, there is a provision, the board at its sole option can extend the contract for up to 4 one-year terms with an increase based on CPI at no greater than 3%. We've had very good experience with RJB and happy with their service and would like to extend it for an additional year. The net cost for next year at a 3% increase would be $294,736.
Poor Jay. So that's actually very good, right? At 3%, that's compared to all the other expenses, that's a good number.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big chunk of money, and that, because of that cap, it could have been a lot worse. CPI was 7.1%. Many of the caps are 5%. When we negotiated it, I didn't really expect that 3 to loom so large, but it was a good thing to have had in the contract.
Any questions or comments on that custodial contract from Mr. Khan? Not hearing any. Thank you, Jay. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
The next item is the administrative team reorganization. Dr. Leali is going to give us a presentation and show us some organizational chart.
Yep. Amy's going to go ahead and put that up if you have it. Thanks, Jay. We're going to give you a little break.
Hope we can hold on.
I know. So with the admin team reorganization, there's really nothing for the board to do on this. I just wanted to kind of give a visual representation of how things are going to be adjusted for next year. We've talked a little bit, we've talked about all of these adjustments at previous meetings, but I just wanted to go ahead and kind of put this up as this is exactly what it's going to look like for next year. So essentially, the Director of Ed Tech and Innovation, which Jay just talked about, will be working with the data and IT specialist that will be the replacement for Paul, and then one tech facilitator. We're conducting interviews right now, IT specialist, and we're hopeful that we're going to find somebody great. And then the other 2 adjustments are really just our 2 assistant principals. So a new assistant principal at LBES that will be also coordinating summer programming. In the past, we have actually gone ahead and hired sometimes a teacher with a type 75, or sometimes somebody else as an administrator to coordinate summer programming. It's difficult not to have somebody consistent doing that each year
What's a type
because,
75?
sorry, it's an administrative degree.
I know.
Yeah, I know. And I don't even think it's called that anymore, actually. That's me being old. So their principal's endorsement. So but just to have somebody consistent will be very helpful because a lot of the planning for summer starts early. It's been going on for some time. So that will be helpful. And then Joe Jaxie, who's been our assistant principal at LBMS, will be going to a 12-month and will be helping in the area of curriculum. And that is a position that is mirroring what Kelly Bay did prior to being the principal. She was the assistant principal at LBMS and then also supporting with curriculum. So I'm working a little bit on some kind of a document or some kind of reference sheet for the website that will help folks, especially who don't work in the district, or parents and community members, to kind of outline even bigger areas that everyone in our administrative team will be taking care of. In bigger districts, there are other positions that are in the district that are sometimes more familiar to folks. So for example, human resources, we don't have a position for that. That's a position that's shared between myself, or my admin assistant, Jay's admin assistants, as well as Jay, Tracy, and our principals. I mean, everybody is kind of on deck for human resources. Curriculum has been shared. Curriculum's been a position in this district from my own kind of fact finding that's bounced around a little bit. And so we're trying to find a happy medium here with a team of people, and that will be myself, Joe, and the principals will be working on curriculum together. Then we also have ELL and bilingual. Some districts have that as an area. That is something that Tracy works on with our principals. And then some districts have grant positions and assessment positions because all these things are really big jobs. So, and those again are worked on by Tracy and Jay in coordination with the principals. So there's all the duties that a big district has to do. We still have to do those things. So the positions are just shared a little bit more fluidly and we work together. So this will be up once we finalize it with our new hires. And then I'm working on, like I said, a companion document that would help with some of the things that aren't listed on here, but are shared among the administrative team. Any questions on that?
Anybody? I would just point out to our massive viewing audience that the board has one employee. The superintendent reports to the board. We do not have the responsibility on this chart below the superintendent level. We hire her with the expertise to manage the district and make these kinds of decisions. We provide oversight to her. So that would be much too granular for us to be diving down into the lower levels of that organization chart. I also say that I appreciate you putting together a who to call when or kind of chart of who's responsible, who's wearing all the hearts, all the hats, wearing their hearts on their sleeves probably too. But that's really helpful, even in doing our work with you, to know how many specifically, because I know you wear a lot of hats, but I would love to see it written down exactly all the hats that you wear, but everybody else too. But our primary concern is for you as well. So that's my comment.
I appreciate it. I think it'll be helpful for everyone, and I do appreciate the board's support. Jay has been working diligently himself and with the rest of the administrative team to try to balance the budget for next year. Some of those increases are reflected on this chart, but I know that this will help us as a district and as an administrative team to run more smoothly and effectively and just make sure that we are not just in compliance, which has been a challenge with a small team that we have, but also kind of exceeding expectations and doing really great things for our students. So I appreciate that.
Any other questions for Dr. Leali? Okay, item D is the field trips, and Dr. Leali, I assume, will be
Yeah, I'm going
highlighting
to
that for
start.
us.
I'm going to start, but then Mr. Blackmer's here to give us a presentation. So this is an annual item, and we haven't really talked a lot about this since I got here, just primarily because of COVID. But in the past, the board has approved trips over 100 miles or overnight trips in a year in advance, so that primarily that timeline is for parents. They can be able to plan and budget for trips accordingly. And we have presented, obviously COVID presented lots of challenges for a few of our trips. We know that that's been disappointing to community members and certainly students. So Nate's here to give a presentation, an update on our recommendation for next school year with regard to these field trips.
All right, thank you very much. It'll be brief, but I do want to just provide a little bit of history for those who maybe don't know much about those trips that we typically bring before you for approval. The first is the sixth grade experience, Springfield. That's actually a one-day trip. That's an early morning departure by bus down to Springfield and back later in the evening. $116 was the cost in 2019, which is when we last went, and we anticipate that to be right around the same price. Here's a sample of some of the places that we go and some of the places that we visit. The Abraham Lincoln Presidential Museum, if you haven't been, is tremendous. That's one of the highlights of the trip. We of course visit the Lincoln Home, the Lincoln Tomb, and kind of the big piece to that is the visit to Illinois State Capitol. We've always benefited from some local connections that sometimes parents have, and we've gotten a few sneak peeks of things like the safe in the basement of the state capitol. We've gotten in there once in a while. We get on the floor of the house and get to see things behind the scenes. So that is, again, a one-day trip, not an overnighter, but more than 100 miles away. So we bring that to you. In seventh grade, this is a combo. It's the Outdoor Ed Lake Bluff Ed trip. And that occurs early on in the seventh grade year in the fall. And the way that that's broken down is essentially the seventh grade is broken in half. It's 3 days, but one of those days for half of the group is going to be here in Lake Bluff doing what's called Lake Bluff Ed. So there's some Lake Bluff history to that. There's sort of a scavenger hunt that occurs as they do a walking tour around town and they visit some of the significant sites around town. And there's usually some service learning component built into that. We've done things like Bernie's Book Bank, Feed My Starving Children as well. So that's the Lake Bluff Ed. So that's one day. Now on the second day is the transition day. Those kids that were at East Troy, Camp Edwards doing outdoor ed would be switching with the students that were here in Lake Bluff. It basically makes for smaller groups, makes them more manageable for both the Lake Bluff Ed, outdoor ed portion. The outdoor ed piece is where they do the 2 days, one night. They stay in cabins. Those cabins sleep up to 12. We usually don't put that many in the cabins. They participate in a variety of team building activities. You see some pictures here from some of the group initiatives that we do. There's also a ropes course. It's a great opportunity for our staff to really connect with kids early on in the school year in a different sort of capacity, a different sort of environment. But two of the really big components to this are the group initiatives, which is really teaching kids to work together to accomplish a common goal, really supporting one another and cheering each other on. Those are groups that we create as teachers and staff. And then more of the individual pushing yourself sort of experiences like the high ropes course where with the support of everyone cheering you on, hopefully students are able to push themselves a little bit outside of their comfort zone. This happens to be a trip I spent years planning as a 7th grade science teacher, so it is near and dear to my heart. But that trip is $150 and has been that amount steadily since I was planning it way back when. So that's the 7th grade Lake Bluff Outdoor Ed, Lake Bluff Ed piece. And then on the 8th grade, which is kind of the biggest of the three, Washington, DC. That is a 3-day, 2-night away trip. The cost per student for this one in 2019 was $1,085. The biggest component of that, of course, being airfare. We do fly to DC and back. Having just recently visited Washington, D.C. with my family, I can tell you that this is not an exhausted list of things that we do, but I can tell you it would be exhausting to try and accomplish what we do in Washington, D.C. Try as I might, we didn't get through all the things that in 4 days that I traditionally do in 3 days with the 8th grade. It helps having coach buses at your disposal to zip you around. I didn't have that benefit. But I did enjoy the metro subway and did some Ubering. Anyway, monuments and memorials, all the Smithsonian's, the National Holocaust Museum. The Capitol has just reopened. Mount Vernon, Arlington National Cemetery. Traditionally, we have students that would participate in a wreath-laying ceremony at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, submitting essays to be chosen, to hopefully be chosen to be part of that. They are strictly limiting us to 4 people to do that, but it's been a great experience for the whole class to be able to observe, also observing the changing the guard at the tomb. And then a variety of the Smithsonian's. The National Museum of African American History and Culture was difficult to get into originally, but in recent years we've been able to get into that museum as well. So that's just sort of an example of some of the things that we have done over the course of our time in Washington, D.C. Now, one of the things that I did want to highlight are some of the considerations, and just with any trip, there's considerations, there's challenges, there's things that we need to work through. I will acknowledge that most middle schools have moved away from trips like the 3 that I've just described to you for a variety of reasons. Staffing is being one of them. We are fortunate to still have staff at Lake Bluff Middle School who are very much interested in making these trips work. So we're in a great spot that way. Certainly the cost of the trips can be a challenge. When you saw the cost of that Washington, D.C. trip, we're over $1,000 per student. I don't anticipate it going down anytime soon. So that is something that is certainly worthy of consideration. I can tell you that we have worked very closely with our families to provide financial assistance for students who need it. That comes in a variety of forms, from full scholarships to partial scholarships to structured repayment plans. Looking over the last 2 or 3 years, generally that amounts to about $15,000 upfront for the district, with a portion of that being repaid with those payment plans that I mentioned. All said and done, usually about $10,000 worth of investment to get students, in a position to be able to go on the Washington, D.C. trip. The other sort of consideration and things to keep in mind are overnight accommodations. We spent some time talking about how we work to accommodate transgendered students or students with special needs that they might have overnight. We work through those things, and we have worked through those things, but those will certainly be components of any future trip that we would have to navigate as well. I did put COVID mitigation on here. We don't know what COVID holds for the future, but certainly that was the reason that the trip did not happen this year or last year. So definitely a consideration. Wanted to also talk a bit about, just get to the next slide here. There we go. We did conduct a survey here. I'm going to be talking a little bit about support for these trips. The last survey that we did was specific to Washington, D.C. That was conducted in 2017. And I've just summarized some of the highlights of that survey. One of the questions asked of parents was about their level of comfort with the cost of the trip. At that time, 79% agreed or strongly agreed with with them feeling comfortable. Sorry, they were 79% agreed or strongly agreed that they were comfortable spending that amount on the trip. I feel it is important to preserve the Washington DC trip. 77% agreed or strongly agreed with that statement. When we talked a little bit or asked a little bit about alternative options, 84.5% of parents felt it was important to keep the trip in the current format, the structure that it was in. When asked about making it perhaps a non-school sponsored trip, something perhaps occurring over a long weekend, only 8.7% were in favor of that. And then we had a percentage that was in favor of eliminating the trip altogether. That was 6.8%. Again, somewhat old data, but I thought valuable to at least bring it back to your attention before getting to kind of the recommendations piece. And with that, I'll go ahead and at least share what we talked about. Sorry.
I want to talk a little bit about security.
It's on the next slide. Yes, I'll get to that one if that's okay. So a little bit about administrative recommendations here. I'm coming tonight to recommend that we, with the assumption that COVID is no longer a factor to the degree that it was the last 2 years, work to re-implement those 3 trips that I've just described for you. Here's a little bit of the rationale behind that. From my perspective, these trips remain highly valued in our school community. And when you talk to students and families about some of their fond memories and experiences and things that they learned, they always go back to those trips as things that were monumental in their middle school years. So I wanted to make sure to point that out. One of the things that also is unique here in Lake Bluff is the fact that we do have the staff and community support that is in place. The fact that we've got teachers who just love to be able to go and have these sorts of experiences with their kids speaks highly to the teaching staff that we have. They are giving up a lot of their own personal time with their families to be away, and they're making special arrangements for childcare, and they're making special arrangements for grandparents to come and be with the kids. But it's worth it from their perspective as well as from mine. I've always enjoyed being part of these trips. I should have said that. I go on all of these with the kids and with the staff. I appreciate being there. That'll tie in a little bit to the security slide in a minute. And then it provides a unique opportunity for students who would not otherwise have the opportunity to do these experiences. I enjoy nothing more than sitting next to the student on the plane who's never flown before. You know, that certainly is something that still we're through with kids, being away from home, seeing things they never would have otherwise seen. So that's a neat thing to be a part of. So those are some of the rationale behind that recommendation. But I also wanted to talk about some of the things that I think probably board members are thinking about, right? What about security? What about safety? One of the things that I can tell you is for any overnight trip, we also need eyes and ears on the kids at all times. We also need to get our own sleep. So we're up late and we're up early, but when we do go to bed, we have security guards. In Washington, DC, that's something that's pretty common given the number of student trips that exist. Typically, we have our male students assigned to one floor in the hotel, and then the female students on another floor. We have multiple security guards on both floors. I spend time getting to know them. They have my cell phone number. Their job is not to engage with kids, but to alert me to any issues that might be coming up. And so they know to call me, and they know exactly where my door is, and they knock on the door. Generally speaking, they don't. It's not generally needed, but if they were to, they know right where to find me. Wanted to bring up the topic of cell phones. Really, the outdoor ed trip is the only trip there that we have continued to prohibit cell phone use. It really just detracts from the whole experience, for one thing, outdoor ed being what it is. The risk of loss and damage of those things is also quite high, and it's worked out best just to leave the cell phones at home. Not to mention cell phone coverage for most of our students in East Troy wasn't all that great to begin with. We still certainly have access to phones. My phone does work there. I am always willing to provide students with the ability to contact their parents when they need to. Also provide parents with my contact information, so if they ever need to get a hold of us while we're gone, they can do that. When we talk about Washington, DC, cell phones are permitted on that trip. However, at the end of the day, after kids have had an opportunity to check in with mom and dad, if that's what they wanted to do, we ask all the kids to power the phones down and we collect them. Just so we're not having phones in hotel rooms overnight with kids either staying up late, playing games. There's just some, with photography and video capabilities on those phones and internet capability on those phones. We find it just more beneficial for everyone involved if those were just sort of out of the room, as I might encourage any parent at home to do with their kids' cell phones as well. So chaperones, we have a great group of well-trained folks. It's going to lead in a little bit into the health medical piece. For each of the buses that we have, both going to and from the airport, as well as touring in Washington, D.C., typically with 2 coach buses. We have a designated nurse, so to speak, who's working with kids on that bus who are going to require different medical needs throughout their time. I'm also very much a part of that. It's not uncommon for us to have for example, a diabetic student on the trip. Many of those students are using Dexcom, in which case I get access to their Dexcom app. I get notifications about blood sugar on my phone. We're monitoring kids' blood sugar throughout the trip. We may have kids with other medications that need to be taken at different times. We have a person on each bus who takes responsibility for that. Kathy Sullivan works tirelessly to make sure that we have all of the information in the electronic as well as hard copy binder that provides all of the health information that we need, the approval to provide medication if need be. If we're doing anything other than prescribed medication, we're always going to reach out to parents, make sure that they know, hey, here with, your son or daughter, they have a headache, they're not feeling very well. We have your permission to provide Tylenol. We'd like to make sure to touch base with you about that. We're not going to be just handing out medication without involving parents. The other thing we do, we always have our school messenger preloaded. So we'll have both a bus 1 list and a bus 2 list loaded into school messenger. It gives me the capability of sending voice messages to everyone's cell phones, text messages to everyone's cell phones, email, and perhaps all 3 at the same time. If we really need you to come and pick kids up when we get back from the bus, that's typically, we refer to that as woofing parents. They happen to be sitting next to each other on the couch. It's got to be annoying. Cell phones going off, landline going off, email, but we've no shortage of tools for communication. So I wanted to highlight some of those things. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, but I enjoyed the opportunity to just talk to you a little bit about those 3 larger field trips that we've typically done.
Thank you. Thank you for it was very helpful to see the parent survey.
Okay.
I know my personal opinion on field trips. I'm very excited to see all this, but it was helpful to see the survey results and, how people feel about it as a whole.
Right. You want to have any questions?
Any questions?
I'm just super excited that you want to bring all 3 of these back. I think they are such an integral part of LDMS, and it's fantastic.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I would tend to agree. I think it's a part of the character of the town, not just the schools, but the town. And I know people who moved here because of that, because it's not at other places. So I think you guys have really, looks like you've really thoroughly thought through so many of the details, which is really reassuring. My only question has to do with equity and equitable use of funds to make sure every kid has the opportunity to experience this wonderful trip without being placed in an awkward position. How does that work?
Well, when it comes to the financial end of things, we are really proactive in communicating with parents to make them aware of the fact that financial assistance is available. As folks are signing up, particularly for the DC trip, and if we're noticing families have not, for one reason or another, it's not uncommon to reach out and just say, hey, wanted to make sure you're aware if it's a financial reason or if there's some other reason. And there certainly are times where a parent just simply says, it's not really for us. It's not something that we're comfortable pursuing, or there's some kind of conflict. There's this wedding or something coming up, or this sports tournament. So there are reasons why a parent would elect not to send their student. But we do try to be proactive, but also respectful of reaching out and making sure that all parents are aware of the financial assistance piece. As far as equitability beyond the financial end of things, we're fortunate that by the time we get students in 8th grade, we've been able to generally establish relationships with those families and with those kids. And they have trusted adults that they work with within our school community and within our building. And we can have some open dialogue about what is it that you need to feel comfortable participating in this trip? What can we do to make sure that you're in a spot where you feel comfortable sending your child? Because we can guarantee that whatever the medical need is, we can meet that need. Let's talk about comfort level with accommodations. What do we need to do there? It really runs the gamut as far as kind of what that might look like in every year. It looks a little different depending on our students attending. We've had everything from a student who's petrified of escalators to one who's never been away from their parents for a night. Like you work through all of those things. And again, it comes back to why the trip, I think, ends up being a pretty special experience for the kids and the families involved. But it requires a lot. I want to reiterate that, a lot of time and effort. It's a full year's worth of preparation before we end up actually going on that trip.
I'm sorry, can you remind us, the kids who don't go, because I know there's always a handful who don't go to DC in
Right.
particular, what do they do?
Great question. Appreciate you asking it, Ann. We try to develop as many parallel experiences as we possibly can. Having the Holocaust Museum here in Skokie, while not exactly the same as the Holocaust Museum in DC, that's typically one of the alternative experiences that kids that choose to stay behind participate in. We have done some student kind of service learning experiences. We do some fun things to get them out of the building. We do some smaller field trips, typically go out to lunch. We've done some things with the Lake Bluff Fire Department. They've done some, welcome those kids in. We always tweet out some pictures of kids dressed up in the firefighting turnout gear and some of the other things. So, every year it looks a little different because we don't always know our population and how many kids are going to be staying behind. Sometimes it could be as few as 5 or 6. Sometimes it can be more like 15 or 20. It really just depends on the year. And so we adjust based on that.
If I could, I just want to emphasize, this is a rare thing for school districts to still be doing. And I know you are appreciative, and as I am, of Nate and Joe and the middle school teachers who are taking this on. I live with a middle school student, just one. And I could not imagine taking on the responsibility of 80 to 90 of those people in another state and doing all the things. And just the fact that our administrative team and staff are not only willing to do this to give kids this experience, but excited about it and really planning thoughtfully for this may look really different, after COVID, and, how we can make sure that those kids who are not engaged in the trip have something meaningful to do at home. I can't underestimate how great that is for the community and how much I appreciate them as administrators taking on that responsibility. And I mean, you hear how much responsibility it is. It is a lot. And I just think the value, we all hear the value. I get to eat lunch with middle school students about once a week. And I always ask them, what is it we should never stop doing? And I've heard a couple times, the trips are something that we're really, really looking forward to, and it should never stop. So I appreciate very much the recommendation and all the thought that's gone into these trips in the past and for the future.
I think the only thing I might add, if it's okay, students who've been on multiple trips, they know this before I say it, but I always tell them before we leave, I expect and anticipate that we'll get positive feedback from the other people that you interact with and have the opportunity to meet along the way. And when those sorts of things stop happening is when we stop recommending these trips. And I continue to recommend it because we continue to get positive. I mean, I'll get emails, I'll get letters. Sometimes folks who run into us in DC or somewhere else and are just blown away by the experience that they had, because often they've had not such great experience with 8th graders or 7th graders or 6th graders. And so that remains something that is really a lot of pride for us when we do that. So thank you.
I was actually just about to bring that very point up, that all the years that I've been on the board, you almost always come back to share some anecdotes of people that you ran into or letters you got or comments about our kids and how, whatever the situation was, how well behaved they were, how helpful they were, whatever it was. It's always really nice to hear those stories. So I would encourage you to continue sharing and setting that bar high for the kids.
We're always the last one off the plane. So those people that get stuck on the way back and think they're going to miss their connecting flights, when they find out we wait until everybody else gets off, they're always appreciative of that too.
That's an easy point to score right there. Right? All right, thank you. Appreciate that. I think we're back to Mr. Khan. Hopefully he's feeling better. We're going to talk about debt collection. Should be brief.
This should be a short one. We have a debt collection company or agency that we signed on with in early 2020. It's good to have a company that we can use should we need to collect fees or other things. In practice and actuality, we've really not used it that often. I think since that time, we really only used it once, and it was successful. We were able to collect some devices that were not returned upon leaving the district. And so we sent the bill for the devices, and then we ended up getting payment for one, and you got the other 2 devices back. So our current debt collection agent is basically, he is going out of business. The pandemic hit him pretty hard, and he's kind of merged with his former partner, and they're buying his account list, and we would just need to sign an agreement with the new firm. It's got pretty much the same language and all the same terms as with the current firm. I attached some more information if you want to see the details, but it's been reviewed by our attorney, and it's really just a change in name because this person will be working at the other firm as well.
Any questions for Mr. Khan? So all these things, I assume we're going to be approving at the next meeting
Yes.
anyway. So
Yes,
We'll bring them
so
for approval next meeting.
that will be the contract renewal for RJB, the field trips, the debt collection, and the audit.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, thanks, Jay. Now we're moving on to F. Dr. Leal is going to talk about the job description history in the district.
This is really brief, and just to bring it to the board's attention, we've been working to update our job descriptions. And I just noticed that the job descriptions we've been working off have a board approval date on them. And I, had some conversations with Mark and tried to get some history on that because typically those wouldn't be brought to the board for approval. But just as an FYI, we want to be flexible with those. We want to make sure that they, really reflect the responsibilities that we need folks to be doing. And so we are moving forward as an admin team to update those as needed, and we won't be bringing them to the board. Obviously, if you'd like an update on job descriptions, I'm happy to bring those. We also work with our union and para joint committee to make sure that the teachers also understand what our job descriptions are about, and so that those are reflected within the evaluation process. We just want to make sure they're consistent, up to date, reflecting our needs, and those will be revised on a regular basis. Every year we'll be looking at them and keeping them up to date.
It's my recollection that the last time that was brought to the board only because they didn't exist. When Dr. Sophie first came here, every day was a different rock she overturned and found something else that needed to be done. It was amazing of how much had to be done to get the district in shape. And that was one of the big issues. She brought it to the board, but not to get into the weeds, but just to make sure at a high level that this is done. And I think that's the way to look at it going forward, that, are we doing this on a regular basis? Do we have a schedule? Is there consistency in the way that we approach it? And maybe we get an annual report or periodic report or something on the status of that stuff. I think it's probably a good way to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? And then back one more time to Mr. Khan, perhaps for the last time this evening on the audit contract.
Yes, we will be bringing an addendum for approval at the next meeting. This will amend our existing audit engagement with our current firm, Baker Tilly. It's simply because it's due to a change in an auditing organization standards that were issued. They changed the language requirements for auditors that impact their engagement letters. And so in order to comply with these new guidelines, they've created an addendum for all of their contracts. We've got one more year. It was a 2-year engagement. Just as a reminder, the total engagement cost is $36,500. However, I don't anticipate the need for a single audit next year, so it would be $3,000 less than that. And it's not required that we have additional signatures. This will just kind of append and adjust our current engagement letter, but it does not change any. We went through it and negotiated some specific language changes to their original engagement letter, and this will not impact any of that. It's just some standard boilerplate stuff in order to comply with the new regulations.
Any audit questions for Mr. Khan? Thank you, Jay. Take care of
welcome.
yourself. Feel better.
Thanks.
And then our final discussion item is to give you guys a periodic update on our special education cooperative, True North. Special Education Cooperative 804, I think is their actual number, right? You want me to start? You want to
I
start?
can start. Yeah, I mean, I think Mark and I both sit on the Leadership Council. I represent not only our district, but also District 112, 113, Deerfield 109, and both Lake Forest districts. So as a superintendent, I kind of represent our northern region. And then Mark is our board representative and as well sits on the Finance Committee. Jay also sits on the Finance Committee. So we have a lot of administrative input into what goes on at True North.
We actually have a disproportionate amount of influence considering the amount of money we spend there.
Yeah.
We really spend a very little amount compared to other districts, but that's good.
But it is good. And I just want to, I highlight that because Tracy, Jay, Mark, and I spend a lot of and do a lot of support of our educational cooperative. And we're very, very grateful to have them. They provide us a lot of services for students that have significant needs. But generally, Mark and I just want to, and it was a note for me, our first year, just to bring periodic updates to the board. So this is all this is. And just to let the board know that right now, we are reviewing the budget for True North. They have made some salary adjustments as well. And obviously, that's something Jay and the Finance Committee are working through in terms of making sure that all 18 districts have an awareness of how that's going to impact their individual budget and planning. And then they're also engaging in a strategic planning process as well. And we are involved in that and able to give some feedback as well as the other 17 districts that are involved in the consortium.
I would say, I was going to highlight some of the exact same things, a little more, some other things. They recently got clobbered by COVID. At least 9 people in their administrative team got COVID recently, so they're under the weather and recovering. Our next meeting this Wednesday is all going to be online and they're still going to do it. We appreciate them toughing it out. That like us, they have had a lot of hiring challenges, finding good people. One of the tricky things for True North is historically districts will come to them in a time of need. Like I need TAs, I need OTs, I need PTs, I need psych help. Can you help me now? But they didn't know about that ahead of time. And historically pre-COVID, because they were so well known in the area, they were really well connected. They didn't have too much trouble finding bodies for just to farm out to districts. Not the case at all anymore. So that's been a real challenge. And so they're rethinking the way they're going to approach being the supplier of all these kinds of services in the future. Like in the past, you didn't have to commit up front. There's some discussion now about you've got to say, I think I'm going to need 10 TAs and an OT and a PT, and if you change mid-year, there's no guarantees that they can serve you. So there's some kind of fundamental changes like that. Dr. Leali mentioned the hiring of TAs. I would point out that, I forget the exact number, but more than 40% of their employees are TAs. We have 10 or 15.
Not that many. We're in the 20s.
Nowhere
But
near.
not 20%.
Not
like-
40%, right. And they adjusted their TA salaries to the limit. We went to 19 or 1950, they went to 23. And the reason they did that is because they've been poached like crazy from all the member districts, because all the member districts were higher than them. And it was hurting their kids are the highest need kids. And so to have staff leaving was really bad for doing the right thing for kids. And so they took it to 23 with the hopes that nobody's going anywhere for a while. Unfortunately, and then you do that in recognizing that you've reset the ground floor and all the other districts are going to start raising their number. It's a very frustrating situation forced upon us by this current economy. So they're trying to make some changes in the job description for TAs and make it more of a career to bring some more professional development to their roles, and also perhaps creating I don't know what they're going to call it, but a professional teachers TA certification that they can use for training for districts, that you can get your TAs certified or trained in certain achievements at the NSSED, True North. As Lisa said, there are budget challenges, the salary increases. Another item that's could affect, as Jay mentioned earlier, there's going to be in addition to salaries and benefits, which like us is 80+% of their budget. There's going to be some big facilities things coming up at True North over the next couple of years. They've got boilers and AC issues they need to pay. There's roofing things. They recently completed and compiled a facility study like we have, which identifies all the maintenance issues and projects it out over, I think, 5 or 10 years, which is good. They didn't have that before. So they are thinking more strategically, financially. Most of my input here is going to be financial. I chair the finance committee there, so that's where I'm most intimate with the understanding. Their current business official is decided to leave True North at the end of this year. They only had it for a year. So that's a big deal. They've got to find somebody to start hopefully July 1st. Well, in fact, they're not hiring a new person from the outside. They've decided, because they've been through so many people over the years that it's been frustrating to keep finding people. They decided to try a new approach and promote from within. They have a person on staff who is a CSBO, and they have a person on staff who has a really long history with the co-op and really wants to be a part of it going forward, and has been involved in the business office, but is not a CSBO, but she's going to go through that program while she is co-chairs that role, so to speak, along with some consultation from member district CSBOs. And Jay has been incredibly helpful on the finance committee. He spent so much time with them individually and with as a committee. I can't thank him enough for all that work. And then finally, they had it over the past year. We've instituted a whole new financial model at the co-op, and this is we're approaching the end of that first year. We're still going through learning, and one of the big changes in the way the finance model works this year is I think in May is what they're calling a true up. It's a true up. It's a reconciliation of what you thought you were going to spend versus what you did spend, and if you did pay more than you used, you get some money back. If you didn't pay as much as you needed to cover all costs, you have to pay more money. That's totally new. That's never been done before at the co-op. That's happening soon. And so it'll be a learning experience. And Jay's probably tremoring in his boots thinking about what could happen as a result of that. But so there's a lot going on. They're also looking at new consulting services. They meet with the stakeholders, the SUPs, the CSBOs, and the special ed directors, Tracy. And every year, I forget what they call them, these planning meetings, and they forecast meetings, and they talk about that, not only their personnel needs and their services needs, but also what are you not getting that you think we should invent? What kind of training do you need? What kind of services are not out there for your kids that we can create? And the co-op is transitioning from an old school way of approaching special education where you provide classrooms for kids that we couldn't handle to the school. The most modern thinking is kids are best educated in their home district to the greatest extent possible. But that requires a lot of training and a lot of innovation, a lot of out-of-the-box thinking that many schools don't have. So they're transitioning from a district that only provided that classroom service to kids in their own brick and mortar buildings to a more consultative training kind of district. There'll always be the need for the brick and mortar part of it, but they're trying to transition their revenue to help districts keep more kids in the classroom. It's a little bit weird because we almost asked the new superintendent to put himself out of business, right? Because he was relying on kids going into the buildings, and that's what paid the bills, kept people employed. And we're asking him to do better and help find ways to keep kids in their home districts. So they're working on revenue sources to support that effort, and that's more consultative in nature. So a lot of transition. Does that make sense? Okay. I think that's it, right? Any other comments, questions, anything about anything? So we're going to finish with public comment. Anything online or
Nothing
any
online.
written or board member want to? Nothing? Okay. So may I have a motion to adjourn at 8:34 p.m., please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.